Hey guys, tonight we slip beneath the surface of the ocean, right at that shimmering line where waves still catch the moonlight, and you're standing on the edge of something you absolutely should not underestimate because, honestly, you probably won't survive this. The water looks calm, almost inviting, like it's pretending to be friendly. You hear it breathe against the hull, a slow inhale and exhale, as if it's deciding whether you're worth swallowing. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what your local time is right now. I love seeing how far these late-night journeys travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step forward, and the surface breaks around you with a quiet slap. Colder than you expected, even though you told yourself you were ready. At first, everything feels familiar enough. The water still carries light, still moves with that gentle, reassuring sway. Above you, the surface ripples like liquid glass, warping the world you just left behind. You can still imagine air. You can still imagine warmth. That won't last. As you descend, you notice how quickly the ocean begins to change its mind about you. The light thins almost immediately, stretched into pale ribbons that slide off your shoulders and vanish below. This is the epipelagic zone, the sunlit layer, and it's the part everyone thinks they know, where fish glitter and colors behave themselves. A mainstream historical fact drifts up from memory. Humans have explored more of the moon's surface than this ocean, even though it's been right here the whole time, pressing against every coastline, quietly refusing to be fully understood. You kick downward, slow and deliberate, because rushing feels wrong here. Sound changes first. The splash and chatter of the surface dissolve into a dense, muffled hush, like someone padded the world with thick curtains. Your own movements feel louder than they should be. Each breath, each shift of your body announces you in a place that prefers subtlety. There's an odd detail you can't shake. The water seems to hold you differently now, more firmly, like it's testing your resolve. It's not aggressive. It's evaluative. The ocean doesn't rush. It has time. It always has. As the light dims, color drains in a predictable but still unsettling order. Reds go first, slipping away like embarrassed guests. Oranges follow. Yellows hesitate, then vanish. Blues linger the longest, stubborn and cool, until even they give up and leave you with a grayscale world. You realize that dark down here doesn't mean night. It means absence. Absence of reference. Absence of comfort. You feel pressure begin its quiet work. Not painful, just present. A steady, compressing reminder that water is heavy, unimaginably heavy. And you are very much not built for this without help. Scholars still argue whether early deep-sea exploration pushed human ingenuity forward faster than any other environment-driven challenge. But floating here, you can feel why it had to. This place demands respect in units of pressure and steel. You glance upward, and the surface already feels distant, unreal, like a memory that belongs to someone else. Above you is a glowing ceiling. Below you is a question mark. And despite every instinct telling you to turn back, curiosity tugs harder. Humans have always been bad at leaving mysteries alone. The temperature drops subtly, a creeping cool that slides along your skin and settles in your bones. It's not freezing yet, but it's purposeful. Like the ocean is reminding you who controls the thermostat. You slow your breathing because panic wastes oxygen. And oxygen is a currency you can't afford to overspend. A shape passes in the distance, not close enough to define, not close enough to threaten, but close enough to register. It moves with confidence, unbothered by the darkening water. This is when it hits you. You are no longer in charge of the food chain narrative. You're a visitor, possibly a very temporary one. The water grows darker still, and now the sunlight above looks like a weak promise. You think about how sailors once feared this descent, believing monsters waited below, ready to drag ships under. They weren't entirely wrong. They were just early. The monsters down here don't roar or thrash. They adapt. Another historical truth surfaces. For centuries, the deep ocean was assumed to be lifeless, a dead zone crushed by pressure and darkness. It wasn't until the 19th century that scientists began proving otherwise, dragging up strange, delicate creatures that had no business existing, except that they did. You pause your descent for a moment, hovering, suspended between worlds. The silence presses in, thick and intimate. It's the kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own thoughts, your own heartbeat. The ocean doesn't interrupt you. It lets you listen to yourself. And that's when you feel it. The subtle shift from I am swimming to I am sinking, not physically, but psychologically. The surface no longer feels like home. It feels like a concept. Ahead of you lies a realm where sunlight never reaches, but life still finds a way. You haven't seen it yet, but you can sense it waiting, patient and unbothered by your awe. You take one more slow breath, steadying yourself, because from here on out, the ocean stops pretending to be familiar. The descent has begun, and it has no interest in turning back with you. You keep descending, and the blue around you thins out like watered-down ink, stretched too far to keep its color. It's subtle at first, almost polite. The ocean doesn't yank the light away. It lets it fade, like a dimmer switch slowly turned by an unseen hand. Above you, the surface is still visible, but now it looks distant and fragile, a trembling sheet of brightness that no longer feels connected to you. This is where your eyes start negotiating with reality. Shapes soften. Edges blur. Distance becomes hard to judge. Your brain, so confident on land, quietly admits it's missing data. The mesopelagic zone, often called the twilight zone, begins here. And that name feels generous. Twilight suggests romance. This feels more like uncertainty. A mainstream historical fact floats through your mind, oddly comforting in its familiarity. Sunlight stops penetrating the ocean at around 1,000 meters, depending on water clarity. Below that, photosynthesis becomes impossible. Every green, growing thing you associate with life loses relevance. And yet the ocean doesn't empty out. It adapts. As the last strong blues fade, the darkness ahead isn't sudden. It's layered. You notice gradients of shadow, darker pockets drifting past like curtains. You realize how much you rely on light, not just to see, but to feel oriented. Without it, up and down become suggestions rather than rules. You check your movement carefully, trusting your body more than your eyes. Sound behaves differently now. It doesn't echo. It doesn't bounce. It just exists. Low, distant vibrations slide through the water, impossible to place. They could be geological. They could be biological. The ocean doesn't label them for you. It simply lets them pass through your bones. Then, something small flashes to your left. A pinprick of cold, blue light, gone before you can focus. You stop instinctively, heart rate ticking up despite your effort to stay calm. Another flash answers it farther away, and another, not random, responsive. You're not alone in this darkening space, and for the first time, the darkness feels occupied. Here's the odd detail that catches you off guard. The darkness doesn't feel empty or hostile. It feels busy, like a crowded room where everyone has turned the lights off. Life hasn't retreated. It's just learned how to whisper instead of shout. You drift lower, and pressure increases in a way you feel more internally now. A steady insistence rather than a squeeze. Your body responds without asking permission. Breathing slows. Movements become smaller. Every action feels slightly more expensive. Like you're paying interest on gravity itself. Scholars still argue whether the creatures of this zone rely more on vertical migration, traveling upward at night to feed, or on opportunistic encounters in the dark. But watching faint glimmers rise and fall around you, it's easy to imagine a constant, invisible commute happening all the time. An ecosystem running on schedules you can't see. You notice that your own presence feels louder now, not in sound, but in disturbance. Tiny lights wink out as you approach, like nervous thoughts retreating. You're an anomaly here, a large, warm shape, displacing water and attention. Nothing attacks you. Nothing greets you either. Indifference, it turns out, is the dominant emotion of the deep. The temperature drops another notch, cool, seeping in with intention. It's not dramatic. It's persistent. This is cold that doesn't shock. It waits. You understand why deep-sea explorers describe the ocean as patient. It has no deadlines. You do. You glance down, and for the first time, there's no reference point at all. No seabed, no structure, just darkness stacked on darkness. It's disorienting in a way that makes you want to laugh nervously, because your instincts are scrambling for something familiar and coming up empty. Another faint glow drifts past, this one greener, slower. It pulses once, twice, then fades. Bioluminescence isn't decoration, it's language, warning, lure, confusion, survival. And you, floating here, don't speak it. You're illiterate in the deep. A quiet realization settles in. The surface world, with its storms and sunlight and noise, is the exception. This, dark, cold, pressurized, is the ocean's default state. Most of the planet lives like this all the time. Noon, midnight, seasons. It doesn't matter down here. You think about how strange it is that humans fear darkness so deeply, yet came from a universe that began in it. The ocean doesn't fear it. It uses it. It hides in it. It thrives. The last hint of natural light finally dissolves above you, snapping like a thread pulled too tight. There's no ceremony. One moment it's there, the next it's gone. You're officially beyond sunlight now, suspended in a place where day and night have no meaning. You hover for a moment, letting that settle. Your eyes adjust, not to seeing more, but to expecting less. And in that adjusted state, you begin to notice what the darkness is offering instead. Movement without form, signals without shape, life without light. You're no longer descending away from the surface. You're entering the deep. You keep moving downward, though down is starting to feel like a polite suggestion rather than a direction with authority. Without light, gravity loses its usual visual cues. Your body knows which way is which, but your mind keeps checking in, slightly unsure, like it doesn't fully trust the situation anymore. The pressure is no longer subtle. It doesn't hurt, but it insists. Every meter adds weight you can't see, only feel. A steady, unblinking presence pressing from all sides at once. It's oddly intimate, like the ocean has wrapped its hands around you, not squeezing, just resting them there to remind you who's in control. This is the bathypelagic zone, the true midnight of the sea, and it stretches on far longer than most people realize. A mainstream historical fact drifts in, grounding you for a moment. Over 90% of the ocean exists at depths humans rarely, if ever, visit directly. Most of the planet's habitable volume lies below you now, invisible and largely unmapped, standing, floating. Here, you're not entering a fringe environment. You're entering the main one. Sound becomes your primary sense, even though it gives you very little to work with. Low-frequency rumbles pass through you occasionally, so deep and slow they feel geological. Maybe they are. Tectonic plates adjusting themselves like someone settling into bed. Maybe they're biological. The distant movement of something enormous that has no reason to acknowledge you. The ocean doesn't clarify. It never does. Then you notice a change, not around you, but within you. Your thoughts have slowed, not foggy, just unhurried. The absence of visual stimulus gives your mind fewer hooks to snag on. There's nothing flashy to react to, nothing demanding your attention. The darkness feels thick, but not aggressive, more like a heavy blanket. An odd detail slips into your awareness. You're not blinking as often. Without light, your eyes don't dry out the same way. Muscles relax. Even your face seems to forget expressions it doesn't need anymore. Fear hasn't vanished, but it's quieter, less theatrical. A faint glow blooms ahead, soft, steady, not flashing. You drift closer, careful not to rush. The shape resolves slowly. A jelly-like form, nearly transparent, trailing delicate filaments that pulse with pale blue light. It doesn't hurry. It doesn't retreat. It simply exists, unconcerned with being observed. Its light isn't bright enough to illuminate the world, just enough to announce itself. I am here, that's all. You remember reading that many deep-sea creatures produce light not to see, but to be seen, or misseen. Confuse predators, attract prey, break up their silhouette in a world where even shadows are rare. Scholars still argue whether bioluminescence evolved primarily as a defensive strategy or an offensive one. But watching this slow, glowing drift, it's hard not to feel that sometimes it's just a way of saying hello to the dark. The creature passes beneath you, its light fading gradually, like an after-image burned into your thoughts. The darkness closes in behind it, seamless and unapologetic. No trace remains. The ocean doesn't keep souvenirs. You continue downward, and the cold deepens. Not sharply, but thoroughly. This is cold that doesn't fluctuate. It doesn't care about seasons. It's ancient, stable, and everywhere. You feel it settle into you, encouraging stillness. Movement here isn't forbidden, but it's negotiated. Another realization surfaces. Nothing down here wastes energy. Every movement has a reason. Every glow costs something. Every adaptation feels precise, honed by time spans that make human history look like a typo. You, by contrast, are inefficient by nature. Warm, curious, restless. A sudden cluster of lights erupts below you. Dozens of tiny sparks flaring and fading in irregular patterns. For a split second it feels celebratory, like underwater fireworks. Then they scatter, vanishing in different directions. And you understand. You startled a living constellation. Small creatures. Startled into signaling chaos. Now gone without explanation. Your heart rate ticks up, then settles again. There's no threat here. Just activity you weren't meant to interrupt. You realize you've stopped thinking in full sentences. Thoughts arrive as impressions. Now, wait. Cold. Slow. Quiet. The ocean isn't silencing you, it's simplifying you, stripping things back to essentials. Another historical truth surfaces softly. When the first deep-sea submersibles descended into these depths, explorers reported feeling an unexpected calm, even euphoria despite the danger. Isolation, darkness, and pressure didn't trigger panic the way people expected. Instead, many described a strange peace floating here. You understand why. The darkness feels less like absence now, and more like space. Open, vast, permissive. You're not being watched. You're being ignored. And that, surprisingly, is comforting. You pause your descent again, hovering, letting the pressure hold you in place. There's no urgency. The deep isn't going anywhere. It has waited millions of years already. And as you linger in that quiet suspension, it becomes clear. This place isn't hostile to life. It's simply indifferent to anything that refuses to adapt. You exhale slowly, letting the cold and dark settle around you like a familiar room. Whatever lies below will reveal itself in its own time. The ocean has taught you that much already. You drift onward, and without warning, the darkness gains texture, not shape exactly, more like layers. You realize the ocean was never truly silent. It was just waiting for you to learn how to listen. Sound doesn't arrive here as sharp events. It seeps, it hums, it presses gently against you from directions you can't point to. Your own movements create a soft turbulence, a whisper of displaced water that feels louder than it should. Each motion sends a message outward, rippling through the dark. You imagine those ripples traveling far beyond you, brushing against things you'll never meet. The ocean is an excellent listener. It records everything. A low vibration rolls through you, so deep you don't hear it. You feel it. Your chest resonates slightly, like a tuning fork brushed by invisible fingers. It could be distant seismic activity, the planet adjusting itself inch by inch. It could be a whale calling from kilometers away, its voice stretched thin by distance and water. Down here, scale becomes unreliable. Big and far can feel exactly like small and near. Here's a mainstream historical fact that hums along with that vibration. Sound travels about 4 times faster in water than in air. For creatures of the deep, sound isn't just communication. It's geography. It's how you know where things are without seeing them. You suddenly feel very visually illiterate. Clicks and pulses drift past you now, faint but distinct. Some are rhythmic. Others feel accidental. The ocean's soundscape isn't chaotic. It's layered, like overlapping conversations in a crowded room where no one speaks your language. You're surrounded by meaning, but none of it is addressed to you. An odd detail slips into focus. Even silence has a sound here. It's not emptiness. It's a low, constant pressure noise. The subtle hiss of water molecules moving, compressing, existing. True silence doesn't survive this much mass. The ocean is always doing something. You slow your movement even more instinctively. Sound carries. Attention carries. You don't know what notices vibrations and what ignores them. So you choose restraint. Stillness feels respectful, like lowering your voice in a cathedral. Scholars still argue whether early marine mammals evolved echolocation, primarily to hunt in darkness or to navigate complex underwater landscapes. But floating here, wrapped in unseen signals, the answer feels like it might be both. When sight fails, you build your world out of echoes. Another deep vibration passes through, closer this time, and your body reacts before your mind does. Muscles tense, breathing tightens, then it fades, leaving behind only the memory of its weight. Nothing appears, no follow-up, just the reminder that presence doesn't require visibility. You think about how humans rely so heavily on sight that we associate danger with what we can see coming. The deep rewrites that instinct. Here, what you don't see and can't hear clearly is far more important. It's a lesson taught gently but persistently. A faint clicking begins somewhere below you, irregular but deliberate. It's not loud, but it's close enough to feel intentional. You hover, listening, heart steadying itself. The clicks pause, then resume, slightly altered. Something is aware of something, but you don't know if that
Another
something
historical
is you.
truth
Surfaces. For centuries, sailors reported hearing sounds from beneath their ships. Groans, knocks, distant calls, often attributed to monsters or spirits. Modern science eventually explained many of them as whales, ice, or geological movement. But the fear was real because the uncertainty was real. Hearing without seeing unsettles something ancient in the human brain. The clicking fades, replaced by a broad, slow whoosh that moves past you like a passing weather system. You don't feel threatened, just bypassed. Whatever made that sound had somewhere else to be. You realize your perception of time is changing again. Without visual markers, moments stretch, seconds feel elastic. You could be here for minutes or hours and it would feel the same. The ocean doesn't mark time loudly. It lets it drift. Another vibration rolls through. This one softer, almost comforting. It reminds you of distant thunder heard through walls. The planet breathing. The ocean settling into itself. You float, suspended inside that breath, small and briefly included. The quiet returns, but it's a quiet full of memory. Sounds linger here, overlapping, fading slowly. The ocean doesn't forget immediately. It absorbs. You take one careful movement forward, testing the water. Nothing reacts. No sudden pulses. No clicks. Just the steady, patient hum of a world that communicates constantly, whether you understand it or not. And as you drift deeper into that layered soundscape, you begin to realize something humbling. The ocean doesn't need light to be alive. It doesn't even need silence to be calm. It thrives in signals you were never taught to hear. You listen anyway. You don't see the light at first. You feel it. A subtle shift in the darkness, like the idea of brightness before brightness itself arrives. Then, slowly, deliberately, the deep begins to blink back at you. A soft blue spark ignites somewhere below, then fades. Another answers it to your right, greener this time, like diluted emerald. The darkness doesn't retreat, but it becomes perforated, stitched with brief, delicate signals. You've entered a place where light is no longer borrowed from the sun. It's made locally, carefully, at a cost. This is bioluminescence, and it feels less like illumination and more like conversation. No one here lights up by accident. Each glow has intent behind it, even if you can't decode the message. You float, careful not to intrude, watching the dark exchange secrets in flashes. A mainstream historical fact slips gently into place. Over 75% of known deep-sea creatures can produce light in some form. In the absence of sunlight, evolution didn't give up on brightness. It reinvented it. Light became a tool rather than a condition. A long, thin shape drifts into view ahead of you, outlined only when it pulses. Its body remains invisible between flashes, as if it exists only in moments. When it glows, you catch glimpses, translucent flesh, a suggestion of fins, an eye that reflects more than it reveals. Then the light cuts out, and it's gone again, perfectly erased. Here's the odd detail that sticks with you. Some deep-sea creatures can control not just when they glow, but how fast, how bright, and even what color their light appears. It's not a flashlight. It's a dimmer switch wired directly into survival. Some flash to attract prey. Others glow underneath themselves to erase their shadow, becoming invisible from below. Light used to hide. That irony settles quietly in your chest. You drift closer to a slow-moving cluster of faint lights, like a drifting galaxy compressed into a small space. Tiny organisms pulse in no obvious rhythm, responding to currents. To each other, maybe to you. The effect is hypnotic. You find your breathing matching the soft, irregular timing of their glow. Inhale, flicker, exhale, dark. Scholars still argue whether bioluminescence first evolved as a defensive reaction, startle and confuse, or as a lure to bring food closer. But watching these gentle, unhurried pulses, it's tempting to think there was also something simpler at play. Visibility. In a world that erases outlines, sometimes being seen at the right moment is the difference between existing and disappearing. A sudden bright flash erupts directly below you. Sharp, white-blue, startling in its intensity. Your body jolts before your mind catches up. Then, just as quickly, it's gone. No follow-up, no movement, just darkness swallowing the space where it happened. A warning, a misfire, a test. The ocean doesn't provide subtitles. You feel small again, but not unwelcome. More like a guest who wandered into a conversation already in progress. Nothing changes pace because of you. Nothing pauses. The deep doesn't perform. Another glow blooms off to the side. This one steady and calm. A slow-moving creature drifts past, carrying its light like a lantern held close to the body. You can't see its full shape, but you don't need to. The glow tells you enough. This being knows exactly where it is. You remember reading that early. Sailors believed strange lights beneath their ships were signs of spirits or omens. St. Elmo's fire, glowing seas. Mysteries layered on mysteries. The truth, as it often is, turned out to be both less supernatural and more astonishing. Life itself learned to shine. As you continue drifting through this quiet constellation field, you realize something else. The darkness here isn't oppressive anymore. It's a backdrop, a canvas. The light doesn't fight it, it complements it. Each glow matters because it's temporary. You pass through a final scattering of pulses, letting them fade behind you. The deeper you go, the more selective the light becomes. Fewer signals, more space between them. Darkness reasserts itself. But now you know what it's capable of hiding. You move on, carrying the afterimage of those quiet sparks with you, aware that even in the deepest dark, the ocean refuses to be entirely unlit. You drift past the last scattered sparks of bioluminescence, and the darkness thickens again, not empty, just economical. Light here is no longer decorative or conversational. It's rare, purposeful. This kind of thing you don't waste unless it keeps you alive. This is where you start to understand a strange truth. Life down here doesn't miss the sun. It doesn't remember it. Sunlight is a surface luxury, a brief phase of the ocean that most of its inhabitants will never experience. Down here, warmth and photosynthesis are irrelevant concepts, like myths from a different planet. A mainstream historical fact settles in calmly. Below the sunlit zone, almost all life depends indirectly on surface production. Organic matter drifting down from above, known as marine snow, or on chemical energy from the earth itself. No green plants, no sunlight-driven food chains, and yet ecosystems persist. You picture it as you float. Tiny flakes of dead plankton, waste, shed skin, and microscopic debris drifting endlessly downward like underwater snowfall. It's not dramatic. It's constant. A slow rain of leftovers, feeding an entire world. The idea is both unsettling and oddly efficient. Nothing is wasted here for long. Here's an odd detail that sticks. Some deep-sea creatures can go months, even years, between meals. Their metabolism runs at a pace that would feel almost like suspended animation to you. Hunger exists, but it's patient. Time stretches to accommodate scarcity. You notice how still everything feels now. Not lifeless, just restrained. Creatures drift rather than swim. Muscles are soft. Movements are minimal. Energy conservation isn't a strategy here. It's a rule. You feel it influencing you too, encouraging smaller motions, longer pauses, fewer thoughts. Scholars still argue whether life in the deep evolved primarily by gradual adaptation from surface ancestors or through more radical evolutionary pathways driven by extreme isolation. But as you hover here, surrounded by beings that feel almost alien, it's easy to believe that the deep rewrote the rules entirely. A shape passes below you. Large, slow, barely defined. You don't see teeth or eyes or anything recognizably threatening. Just mass, presence. It doesn't react to you. It doesn't accelerate. It simply continues, unbothered. Like a drifting continent of flesh. Whatever it is, it has no reason to rush. The cold here is absolute in a way that's hard to explain. Not painful, not sharp, just final. It doesn't fluctuate. It doesn't negotiate. This is cold that has been cold for millions of years. You feel it settle into your awareness, flattening urgency, smoothing out emotional spikes. Everything feels level. You think about how humans associate life with warmth, with sunlight, green growth, busy motion. The deep challenges that assumption quietly. Life doesn't need to be loud or fast or bright. It just needs to work. Another historical truth surfaces. When scientists first discovered thriving ecosystems around deep sea, hydrothermal vents in the late 1970s, it upended long-held assumptions that sunlight was essential for complex life. Entire communities existed based on chemical energy alone. The discovery didn't just change oceanography. It changed how scientists thought about life in the universe. You drift onward, letting that idea expand. If life can thrive here, cold, dark, pressurized, then the definition of habitable suddenly feels much larger. The deep ocean becomes less of an exception and more of a proof of concept. A faint movement catches your attention. A small creature suspended in the water, barely moving, mouth slightly open. It's waiting, not hunting actively, just positioned perfectly for opportunity. Patience again. Everything here runs on it. You realize you haven't felt fear in a while. Caution, yes. Awe, definitely. But fear has softened into respect. The deep isn't hostile, it's selective. It doesn't chase you away. It simply refuses to adapt to you. As you continue descending, the sense of isolation grows, but so does a strange companionship. You're surrounded by life, even if most of it remains unseen. The ocean isn't empty. It's private. And as the darkness closes in once more, you carry that realization with you. Even without sunlight, without warmth, without urgency, life doesn't just survive down here. It persists. You start to notice bodies that don't follow the rules you grew up with. Shapes that feel unfinished, exaggerated or rearranged, as if evolution was experimenting quietly while no one was watching. In the deep, form doesn't chase beauty or balance. It chases function. Everything else is negotiable. A creature drifts past you with a head that seems far too large for the rest of its body. Its mouth hangs open, impossibly wide, lined with thin, needle-like teeth that never fully close. The rest of it tapers off into something almost fragile, like the body was an afterthought. Once the mouth was perfected, it doesn't lunge, it doesn't snap. It simply waits, trusting that in a place this empty, anything that comes close is worth trying to eat. This is a common pattern here. When food is rare, you don't specialize, you generalize. A mainstream historical fact slips in easily. Many deep-sea fish evolved oversized mouths and expandable stomachs, allowing them to consume prey larger than themselves whenever the opportunity arises. Meals are unpredictable. Missing one could mean waiting a very long time for the next. You notice something else unsettling. Eyes that shouldn't work, yet do. Some creatures have enormous, glassy eyes that catch even the faintest glow, tuned specifically to detect bioluminescence. Others have no eyes at all, smooth skin where vision would normally sit. Seeing here is optional. An odd detail catches you off guard. Some deep-sea animals are almost completely transparent. Organs float inside them like suspended machinery, barely concealed. In a world without light, camouflage doesn't mean blending in. It means not casting a shadow, not interrupting darkness. Scholars still argue whether the extreme forms seen in abyssal creatures represent optimal solutions or evolutionary compromises forced by scarcity. But drifting among these bodies, it feels less like compromise and more like ruthless efficiency. Nothing extra survives long down here. You pass something that looks unfinished at first, a drifting ribbon with faint internal glows, no clear front or back. Then it pulses, contracts, and reorients itself smoothly, revealing intention. Even confusion has structure here. Even softness has purpose. The pressure continues its steady insistence, but your awareness has adapted. It's no longer alarming. It's background. Like gravity, like time. You realize how quickly the human mind normalizes the extraordinary when escape isn't an option. Another creature glides by beneath you, long and eel-like. Its skin a deep, light-absorbing black. Not dark gray, not blue. Black in a way that seems to swallow the faint glow around it. You remember reading about fish that evolved ultra-black skin, absorbing over 99% of incoming light to avoid detection. Down here, being invisible is an advantage you can't afford to lose. You feel a flicker of something like gratitude for your own complexity. Lungs, bones, temperature regulation, but also an odd admiration for these beings that stripped themselves down to the essentials. No sentiment, no redundancy, just survival refined. Another historical truth surfaces. Many deep-sea species exhibit sexual dimorphism so extreme it borders on absurd. In some anglerfish, the male is tiny, existing only to find a female and fuse with her body permanently, becoming little more than a reproductive appendage. Romance down here is not a priority. You drift past a faintly glowing lure hanging in the dark, bobbing gently. You don't see the body attached to it, just the invitation. It's elegant in a terrifying way. Beauty designed to deceive. You keep your distance, instincts sharp even in this dreamlike calm. The deeper you go, the more these strange forms stop feeling strange. They start feeling inevitable. Of course, bodies would look like this here. Of course, rules would change. The deep doesn't reward familiarity. It rewards solutions. You realize something quietly profound. If a human were born here, raised here, shaped entirely by this pressure and darkness, these creatures would seem normal. It's the surface world that would look exaggerated, loud, wasteful. As another shadow slides past you, unlit and uninterested. You let go of the need to categorize everything you see. Names feel unnecessary. What matters is function, presence, continuation. You float there, surrounded by bodies that shouldn't work but do. And you understand that life doesn't aim for elegance. It aims for persistence.
Hey guys, tonight we step straight into a place that does not want you here. A desert kingdom frozen in the exact moment when the sun is highest, brightest, and most offended by your existence. Noon, the hour where shadows give up. Air turns heavy, and even time seems to squint. You can already feel it on your skin, that dry, pressing heat that doesn't burn so much as claim. And yes, just to set expectations early, you probably won't survive this. But relax, you're perfectly safe right where you are. You're standing just outside the city's edge. Behind you, nothing but dunes folding into dunes, an endless geometry of sand. Ahead of you, stone walls shimmer like they're unsure whether they're solid or a mirage. The sun hangs directly above, no angle, no mercy, turning the sky into a pale, washed-out blue that feels stretched thin. This is not the golden, romantic desert of sunsets and silhouettes. This is the honest one, the midday desert. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what your local time is right now. I love imagining these stories unfolding across different nights and days around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take your first step forward. The ground beneath you is hard-packed earth and stone. Not soft sand like movies promised. Desert cities don't waste energy on aesthetics. Every surface here has learned a lesson the hard way. The air smells faintly of dust and sun-warmed rock. There's no dramatic wind, no howling emptiness, just stillness, thick and deliberate. As you pass through the gate, the city reveals itself slowly, like it's conserving effort. Streets are narrow, intentionally so. Buildings lean inward, conspiring to steal what little shade they can from the sky. This isn't accidental. It's survival rendered in architecture. A mainstream historical fact slips quietly into your thoughts. Many ancient desert cities, from parts of the Islamic Golden Age to North African and Middle Eastern kingdoms, were deliberately designed to minimize sun exposure, long before anyone used words like urban heat management. Your footsteps echo, then soften. The city is not empty, but it is subdued. Noon here is not for movement. It's for endurance. Doors are closed. Windows are small, recessed deep into stone walls. You catch a glimpse of fabric shifting behind a lattice. Screen. Someone watching the street without stepping into it. Smart choice. The heat presses against you, but not aggressively. It's constant, unblinking. Sweat evaporates almost as soon as it forms, leaving your skin tight and dry. An odd detail you wouldn't expect. In extreme dry heat, you can dehydrate without ever feeling sweaty. The desert doesn't announce its victories. It just collects them. You pause in the middle of the street, instinctively looking for shade, and realize how rare it is at this hour. Shadows shrink to thin lines hugging walls like they're embarrassed to exist. Above you, the sun feels close. Not visually, but emotionally, as if it's paying attention. Somewhere deeper in the city, you hear a sound. Not voices, those are scarce right now, but metal lightly tapping metal. A blacksmith maybe, stubborn or obligated, working through the heat. The sound carries farther than it should. Heat does strange things to air, bending it, thickening it, making distance feel unreliable. You start walking again, slower now. Not because you're tired, but because speed feels inappropriate here. The desert teaches patience through discomfort. This is where time behaves differently. Minutes stretch. Movements feel expensive. Noon doesn't rush, and neither should you. You notice clothing next. The few people who do pass through the street aren't dressed lightly the way you might expect. Loose, layered garments cover skin completely. Long sleeves. Head coverings. Light-colored fabrics that reflect sunlight instead of absorbing it. This isn't tradition for tradition's sake. It's physics dressed as culture. Covering skin can keep you cooler than exposing it. A fact that surprises outsiders every single time. Scholars still argue whether such adaptations came first from observation or from painful trial and error. But standing here, it feels safe to assume the answer is both. The city breathes shallowly at noon. Courtyards hide behind walls, holding pockets of cooler air. Somewhere, Water moves underground. Canats, wells, channels carefully maintained over generations. You can't see them, but you feel their presence the way you feel the promise of shade before you reach it. Water here isn't just a resource. It's authority. Control water and you control survival. You turn a corner and find yourself in a small open square. At any other hour, this might be a market. Now it's mostly empty. Stalls are shuttered. Fabric awnings are pulled tight, creating islands of shadow that no one currently occupies. The square feels paused, like the city collectively agreed to hold its breath until the sun moves on. There's a strange calm to it. Not peaceful, more disciplined. The Desert Kingdom doesn't fight noon. It waits it out. Your mind wanders as it tends to do when movement slows. You think about how many empires rose in environments like this. How power didn't always come from fertile land or gentle climates, but from mastering inhospitable ones. Noon is part of that mastery. If you can function here, if you can build, trade, rule, and endure at the sun's peak, you can endure almost anything. A bird crosses the sky overhead, wings wide, then vanishes beyond the walls. Even animals minimize effort now. Somewhere, insects buzz briefly, then fall silent again, as if remembering the rules. You step into a sliver of shade at last, pressed against a stone wall. The temperature drops just enough to feel miraculous. Your shoulders relax without you noticing they were tense. Shade isn't comfort here, it's currency. You glance back toward the street, watching the light pool where you stood moments ago. Noon continues, unmoved by your small relief. The kingdom holds steady, ancient and practiced, letting the sun have its hour. And as you stand there, breathing slower, you begin to understand something important. This place doesn't survive despite the heat. It survives because it learned to live with it. The sun remains overhead. The city waits. And so do you. You stay in the shade a moment longer than necessary. Not because you're weak, okay, maybe a little, but because the city itself seems to approve of lingering. Here, rushing is suspicious. Noon rewards stillness. When you finally step back into the light, it's with intention. Like you're borrowing the sun's attention rather than challenging it. This part of the city feels older. You can tell by the way the stones don't quite match, by how some walls bulge slightly, as if centuries of heat made them soften and sag. The streets narrow even more, sometimes shrinking to corridors where two people would have to negotiate. Passage with polite sidesteps and murmured apologies. These aren't mistakes. They're strategies. Less sky visible means less sun allowed in. The city is constantly arguing with the light, and surprisingly, it wins more often than you'd expect. The heat is still there, of course. It presses down like a hand on your upper back, reminding you that this argument is never settled, only managed. You notice how the air smells different here. Less dust, more stone. Warm limestone has a scent, faint but distinct, like chalk left out in the sun. An odd detail. Some desert cities intentionally used specific stones not just for strength, but for how slowly they absorbed and released heat. Walls here are thermal memory devices, holding on to yesterday's cool like a secret. You pass beneath a covered walkway, wooden beams overhead, woven mats stretched across them. The shade underneath feels darker, deeper, almost blue compared to the harsh white light outside. Your eyes take a second to adjust. That adjustment matters. Architecture here doesn't just shape space, it shapes perception. Light becomes something rationed, served in controlled amounts. A door opens quietly nearby. Not wide, just enough. A woman steps out, fully covered, carrying a clay jar balanced easily against her hip. Her movements are economical, practiced. She doesn't look at you directly, but she's aware of you. Everyone here is. Eye contact is another thing conserved at noon. It invites interaction, and interaction costs energy. You continue walking, and the city slowly reveals its logic. Buildings cluster tightly, sharing walls, sharing shade, sharing heat loss. This is communal survival baked into stone. A mainstream historical fact surfaces naturally here. Many desert cities were built with shared walls not just for defense, but to reduce surface area exposed to the sun, keeping interiors cooler. Individual comfort was never the goal. Collective endurance was. Somewhere above you, fabric flutters gently. Laundry hung across a narrow gap between buildings, creating an accidental canopy. The cloth is sun-bleached, once vibrant, now softened into pale creams and faded blues. Even color learns humility here. Bright pigments don't last long under a sun like this. You hear water again. Closer now. A soft, almost shy sound, like it doesn't want to draw attention. You follow it instinctively and find a small public fountain tucked into a recess. The water trickles slowly, deliberately. No splashing, no waste. People don't crowd it. Instead, they approach one at a time. Fill containers, wet cloths, then retreat back into shade. Water is shared, but quietly, respectfully. Scholars still argue whether such restraint came from cultural values or pure necessity, but standing here, it feels like the distinction doesn't matter. Necessity became culture. You dip your fingers into the water. It's cool. Not cold, just enough to reset your senses. The stone basin around it is smooth from centuries of hands doing exactly what you're doing now. There's comfort in that continuity. Noon may be brutal, but it's predictable, and predictability is something humans can work with. Leaving the fountain, you notice the absence of certain sounds. No shouting, no laughter, no animals roaming freely. Even children, who usually break every social rule ever invented, are nowhere to be seen. They're inside, sleeping, playing quietly, being trained early in the art of waiting. In this kingdom, patience is learned before ambition. You turn into another street and feel the temperature shift. Again, not dramatically, but enough to notice. A breeze, thin, hesitant, but real. It slides through the narrow passage like it was invited. This is no accident either. The street curves slightly, angled just enough to catch prevailing winds and guide them through the city. Wind here is not weather, it's infrastructure. Your pace slows further, not because you're tired, but because the city seems to move at this speed, and you don't want to stand out. The desert has always been suspicious of those who don't listen. As you walk, your thoughts drift to how this place looks from the outside, a cluster of stone, under an unforgiving sky, and how different it feels from within. From afar, it's hostile. From inside, it's calculated, protective even. The heat hasn't lessened, but your relationship to it has changed. It's no longer an enemy charging at you. It's a constant you've learned to negotiate with. Somewhere behind thick walls and shaded courtyards, life continues quietly. Meals are prepared slowly. Conversations happen in low tones. Noon passes not with drama, but with discipline. You reach another small square, this one entirely shaded by overlapping awnings. The light here is amber, filtered, gentle. For the first time since entering the city, you feel almost comfortable. Not relaxed. Comfortable is too generous, but held. As if the city is saying, you made it this far, now wait. And so you do. Standing in the shared shade, breathing evenly, you let the kingdom at noon continue its careful, ancient rhythm around you. You begin to notice the people more clearly. Now, not as passing shapes, avoiding the sun, but as systems. Every movement, every pause, every choice feels rehearsed, not in a stiff way, but in the way long habit settles into muscle and bone. These are people who don't burn. Not because they're immune to heat, but because they learned, patiently and collectively, how not to fight it. A man crosses the street ahead of you, unhurried, wrapped in layers that look excessive until you really look. The fabric is loose, lifted slightly from his skin by the movement of air. His sleeves are long. His head is covered. His face is shaded by cloth and angle. You realize something quietly important. Almost no skin is exposed. The desert sun isn't just hot, it's invasive. Covering yourself here isn't about modesty first. It's about boundaries. This is where a common misconception dissolves. Outsiders always assume less clothing equals cooler bodies. But in places like this, the opposite often proves true. Loose garments trap a thin layer of air against the skin, slowing heat transfer and protecting from direct radiation. That's a mainstream historical fact, supported by centuries of lived practice. Across desert cultures, long before thermodynamics had a name. You pass a small doorway where an elderly woman sits just inside the threshold. Half in shadow, half in light. She's shelling something into a wooden bowl. Slow, steady motions, no wasted energy. She doesn't look up as you pass, but you feel seen anyway. Noon doesn't encourage conversation, but awareness stays sharp. Heat dulls the reckless, not the attentive. An odd detail catches your attention. You don't see many people drinking water constantly, the way modern advice insists you should. Instead, they sip sparingly, at intervals, often paired with food or rest. Gulping is rare. Conservation isn't just about supply, it's about balance. Too much water too fast can upset the body's careful equilibrium in extreme heat. The desert teaches moderation with consequences. You walk alongside a pair of men carrying a covered basket between them. They switch sides occasionally, wordlessly, sharing the burden. Their pace never changes. Sweat darkens the fabric beneath their arms, but it dries quickly, leaving pale salt traces. No one complains. Complaints cost energy. Energy is precious. Scholars still argue whether these behavioral adaptations are primarily cultural traditions passed down through Storytelling and imitation, or biological acclimatization, shaped subtly over generations. But standing here, watching these people move, through noon like it's a known quantity rather than a threat, the argument feels almost academic. Whatever the origin, the result works. You notice posture next. People stand differently here. Shoulders slightly forward. Heads angled down just enough to keep the sun off the eyes. Movement's economical. There's a quiet elegance to it, like a dance learned without mirrors. Even when someone stops to speak, they position themselves instinctively where shade falls best. Bodies aligning with walls and door frames as naturally as water finding low ground. A child darts across a sunlit gap, quick and barefoot, then disappears into a doorway. The movement is fast, precise, practiced. Children learn early here that the sun is not something you linger under. Play happens indoors or in shade. Noon is respected, not challenged. This respect isn't fear, it's literacy. They can read their environment fluently. As you continue, you realize something else. No one here is trying to prove anything. There's no bravado about endurance, no pride in suffering. Survival here isn't a performance. It's maintenance. The Desert Kingdom doesn't reward heroics. It rewards consistency. You feel it in your own body now. Your movements have slowed without effort. You pause when others pause. You step into shade without thinking. Your breathing deepens, steadies. The heat hasn't changed, but you have. Adaptation doesn't always feel dramatic. Sometimes it just feels like learning when not to move. A small group sits in a shaded alcove, sharing a simple meal. Flatbread, dates, something, wrapped in cloth to keep it cool. They eat quietly, tearing pieces, passing them along. Food choices here make sense in heat. Salty, energy-dense, easy to digest. Heavy meals wait for evening. Noon is not indulgent. It's practical. Another historical truth surfaces naturally. Many desert societies structured their daily schedules around the sun, with work concentrated in early mornings and late afternoons, and a deliberate slowdown or complete pause during midday. What outsiders once dismissed as laziness was, in reality, sophisticated time management aligned with climate. You lean briefly against a wall, feeling its warmth, not scorching, just stored heat from hours of exposure. Thick walls absorb energy slowly and release it even more slowly, creating a thermal buffer. This is architecture mirroring human behavior. Absorb, wait, release. Everything here follows that rhythm. There's a quiet pride in these adaptations, but it's understated. No one lectures you about how to survive. The city teaches by example. You copy what you see because it works, because resisting it feels foolish. As you watch people pass, you realize something else unsettling and comforting at the same time. This place doesn't care if you're comfortable. Comfort is optional. Survival is not. And yet within those limits, there's a surprising gentleness. Shade offered without words. Water shared without spectacle. Space respected. You think back to the moment you first stepped into the city. How hostile the heat felt. Now it's still intense, but familiar. Like a strict teacher whose rules you're beginning to understand. The people around you don't conquer the desert. They cooperate with it. And standing there, wrapped in borrowed patience, you begin to understand why they don't burn. They don't fight noon. They live around it.